Samuel Morrison đang quỳ bên bờ suối Bitterroot, hai tay bọc đầy bùn đỏ như máu, khi tiếng gầm gừ khè khiến gáy ông dừng đứng. Không phải sỏi. Ông biết tiếng sỏi. Đây là thứ khác. Nước suối chảy qua kẻ tay, nhuộm đỏ từ mớ đông phía thượng nguồn. Morrison không dám quay đầu, không ngay lập tức. Khẩu Winchester nằm cách đó 10 bước, dựa vào thân cây thông, còn đạn nhưng không lên nòng. Thói quen cầu thả của một người đàn ông nghĩ rằng mồi nguy lớn nhất nơi đây chỉ là rắn đuôi chuông. Tiếng gầm gú lại vang lên, gần hơn. Morrison từ từ xoay người, đầu gối vẫn chìm trong bùn vẹn suối, tim đập như trong trận trong lồng ngực. Không phải lần đầu ông cảm thấy thế, nhưng lần đầu kể từ Shiloh, 20 năm trước, khi ông còn trẻ và nghĩ rằng chiến tranh là vinh quang. Một con báo sư từ con, không phải con, đã lớn hơn thế nhưng chưa trưởng thành. Khoảng 1 tuổi, Morrison ước tính dựa vào kích thước và bộ lông vẫn còn vết sáng của tuổi thơ. Nó đứng cách ông 15 bước, chân trước phải nhắc lên, máu nhỏ giọt xuống lá thông khô. Chết tiệt, Morrison thì thầm, con vật không lối, không tấn công, chỉ đứng đó. Ánh mắt vàng dõi theo khi Morrison từ từ đứng dậy, bùn nhão chảy xuống quần vải bò. Mặt trời đã bắt đầu chậm ngọn cây, kéo bóng dài qua mặt đất, chẳng mấy chốc sẽ tới. Morrison lùi một bước về phía khẩu súng, con báo sư tử cũng tiền một bước, vẫn khấp khiễng, vết máu về một đường mới trên đất. Mày muốn gì? Morrison hỏi, giọng khàn. Sao mày không chạy? Thay vì trả lời, tất nhiên là vậy, con vật làm một điều kỳ lạ. Nó quay đầu nhìn về phía nam, nơi những tán thông dày đặc chìm trong bóng tối, rồi lại nhìn Morrison. Cử chỉ rõ ràng như lời nói đi theo. Morrison cười khẩy. Không đời nào. Thế con báo sư tử trẻ tiến thêm 3 bước, chân thương khiến nó loang choang. Máu giờ đã tạo thành vùng nhỡ nơi nó đứng. Rồi, với động tác khiến Morrison nín thở, nó kéo lê chiếc túi y tế bằng da của ông, chiếc túi ông vừa đặt cạnh suối khi thu thập cây thuốc. Đồ chết tiệt. Morrison nuốt nước bọt. Mày biết cái đó là gì? Con vật thả túi xuống, chính xác ngay cạnh chân bị thương của nó. Sau đó nó ngồi xuống, nặng nề như ông già, và chờ. Morrison nhìn con vật, nhìn túi y tế, nhìn bầu trời đang tối dần. Trong túi có carbolic, băng vải sạch, một ít laudanum còn lại từ cả phẫu thuật tuần trước ở thị trấn. Công cụ của nghề, nghe ông đã mang từ chiến trường đến vùng hoang dã này. Tao không phải thú y, ông nói với con báo. Nó không nhúc nhích. Morrison lau mồ hôi trên trán. Tay run rẩy không phải vì sợ, mà vì nhận ra điều không thể. Sinh vật này hiểu. Bằng cách nào đó, nó biết ông là ai, ông làm gì, và nó đến tìm ông. Ông bước về phía túi y tế, cẩn thận, mạt không rồi con vật. Còn báo sư tử vẫn ngồi yên khi Morrison cúi xuống nhặt túi. Ở cù lý này, ông có thể thấy vết thương rõ hơn. Một mảnh gỗ dày cỏ, ngón tay đâm sâu vào gần bàn chân. Có thể từ cái bẫy gỗ cũ nát. Được rồi, Morrison thì thầm. Nhưng mày cần tao sẽ bận mày. Hiểu chứ? Con vật chớp mắt chậm rãi. Cử chỉ mà Morrison nhận ra từ mèo nha. Sự tin tưởng khi ông mở túi y tế, rút chai carbolic ra. Một mảnh giấy rơi xuống. Không phải giấy của ông, Morrison cậu mày. Nhất là đó là một mảnh da thuộc, cũ kỹ, với những ký hiệu ông không nhận ra. Không phải tiếng Anh, không phải tiếng bộ tộc nào ông từng thấy. Con báo sư tử gầm gừ khẩn trương, nhìn về phía cánh rừng tới. Lần này không phải cầu xin, là cảnh báo. Morrison nhét mạnh ra vào túi áo, tim đập dồn. Có thứ gì đó trong rừng, thứ gì đó khiến một con báo sư tự tìm đến con người để được giúp đỡ. Thứ gì đó đáng sợ hơn cả vết thương đang chảy máu. Bóng tối nuốt chửng thung lũng khi Morrison nhìn vào đôi mắt vàng của con vật và đưa ra quyết định thay đổi mọi thứ. Dẫn đường đi! Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Morrison quỳ xuống, đầu gối đè lên kim thông, Mùi carbolic xốc lên khi ông mở nắp chai. Con báo sư tử trẻ giật mình, răng nanh lộ ra. Đừng! Morrison nói, giọng đều. Sẽ đau đấy. Ông nắm lấy bàn chân của con vật, lông ẩm, ướt máu. Mảnh gỗ đâm xuyên qua gần bàn chân, đau nhòn nhô ra phía dưới. Morrison rút con dao Bowie, lưỡi dao cùn. Con báo gầm gú. Tao biết. Morrison đặt lưỡi dao vào gốc mảnh gỗ. Cần tao nếu mày can. Ông đấy. Cô bật ra kèm theo máu tươi. Con vật rít lên, móng vuốt cào vào đất. Nhưng không cần. Morrison đổ carbolic vào vết thương, xui bột trắng. Mùi hóa chất cay nồng làng với mùi máu. Tay ông rút băng vải từ túi, quần chặt quanh bàn chân. Máu tham qua ngay lập tức, nhưng sẽ giữ được. Tạm thời. Con báo sư tử đứng dậy, thứ chân, vờn khắp khiếng nhưng đỏ hơn. Rồi nó làm điều Morrison không ngờ, căng vào tay áo ông, kéo, kéo mạnh hơn. Vai rạch, tiếng xé vang lên trong không khí tĩnh lặng. Con vật lùi về phía rừng thông, vẫn ngoạm chặt tay áo. Chết tiệt, tao hiểu rồi. Morrison đứng dậy, với tay lấy túi y tế. Nhưng tới rồi, tao không nhìn thấy. Tiếng hú vang lên, sói, không xa. Một con khác đáp lại từ phía đông, gần hơn. Morrison lục túi tìm que diêm, còn 6 quẹ. Ông quẹt quẹ đầu tiên. Ánh sáng yếu ớt, soi rõ đường, mòn hẹp, xuyên qua thông. Con báo sư tử kéo mạnh, máu từ chân nó về đường trên kim lá. Que diêm cháy hết, tối trở lại. Morrison quẹt quẹ thứ hai, bước theo con vật. Chân trái đập phải rễ cây, đầu gối khuỵu xuống. Que diêm rời, tật ngấm. Khí thật. Quẻ thứ ba, ông rút thằng củi từ túi, vạch dầu X lên thân cây thông để tìm đường về, nếu còn cơ hội quay về. Con báo dần sâu hơn vào rừng. Morrison đem bước 50, 100, 200. Quẻ diệm thứ tư, thứ năm. Quẻ cuối cùng sáng lên. Phía trước, qua những thân cây, ông thầy khẽ núi hẹp. Đá granite dừng đứng hai bên như nanh răng khổng lồ. Từ trong vọng ra tiếng gầm, không phải một con báo sư tử, là hai. Morrison's shoulder scraped granite as he squeezed through the canyon entrance. Rock dust fell into his eyes. The gap barely wide enough for a man, let alone the young cougar that had somehow slipped through ahead of him. Darkness swallowed everything beyond arm's reach. His fingers found the canyon wall, smooth, wet with seepage. Water trickled somewhere close, the sound echoing off stone. Morrison shuffled forward, boots sliding on slick rock. The second growl came again, towards, deeper, adult, 10 feet in. The canyon widened. Morrison blinked hard, eyes adjusting. Moonlight filtered down from the narrow strip of sky above, just enough to make out shapes. The young cougar stood near the far wall, head low, making soft chirping sounds Morrison had never heard from a cat before. Then he saw her. The mother cougar lay on her side, right rear leg twisted at an angle that made Morrison's stomach clench. Metal gleamed in the moonlight, a Newhouse No. 5 bear trap. The jaw teeth buried deep in muscle above the ankle joint. The leg wasn't broken. Small mercy. But the wound bus. Morrison stepped closer. The mother's head lifted, lips pulled back from yellowed fangs. Her growl vibrated through the canyon floor into Morrison's boots. Easy, he said, though his mouth had gone dry as dust. Easy now. The smell hit him. Infection. Blood gone bad. The sweet, sick stench he knew from field hospitals. 3 days, maybe 4, judging by the crust of dried blood painted across the rock beneath her. Dark streaks showed where she'd dragged herself in circles, the trap's chain wrapped tight around a boulder. Her breathing came in quick, shallow pants. Morrison had heard that sound before. Charlottesville, 1864. Men dying slow from gut wounds, the body shutting down, piece by piece. The young cougar, her cub, pressed its nose against her neck. She managed to lick its head once before her strength gave out. Her head dropped back to the stone. Morrison knelt 5 feet away, close enough to see the damage clearly. The trap's teeth had missed the main artery, pure luck, but infection had set in. Green pus leaked between the metal teeth. The flesh around the wound had swollen purple-black. Fever heat radiated from her body. "Jesus Christ," Morrison muttered. "What kind of bastard sets a bear trap in a canyon this narrow?" He knew the answer. Trappers who didn't care what they caught, long as the pelt brought money. This trap was worth 2 months' wages. Illegal as hell for cats, but who'd check way out here? The mother's eyes tracked him as he opened his medical bag, not gold like her cubs, darker, amber in the moonlight. Her pupils dilated and contracted with each labored breath. Morrison had seen that in humans, the body fighting to stay conscious, to protect what mattered. He pulled out the carbolic, the last of his clean bandages, the bottle of laudanum with barely 2 doses left. Not enough, not nearly enough for an animal this size. "This is how it is," he told her, voice steady as he could make it. "I can get that trap off, clean the wound, but you've got to let me close enough to do it." The mother cougar bared her teeth, 200 pounds of dying predator, still strong enough to tear his throat out if she chose. Morrison looked at the cub, then back at the mother. "Your baby brought me here, walked right up to a human and asked for help. You think I come all this way just to hurt you? Stupid to talk to an animal like it understood?" But something shifted in those amber eyes. The lips lowered, covering the fangs. Not trust exactly. Maybe just too tired to fight anymore. Morrison scooted closer, inch by inch. The trap's chain had rubbed raw grooves in the rock from her struggles. The manufacturer's mark on the trap had been filed off. Trappers covering their tracks. But Morrison recognized the design. New house, sure enough. Best trap money could buy. Worse luck for anything that stepped in it. He examined the mechanism. The springs would need both hands to compress. He'd have to get his knee on one side, lean his full weight, all while inches from those claws. Water dripped somewhere deeper in the canyon. Morrison traced the sound, saw where a spring leaked from the rock wall, running over carved symbols worn smooth by centuries. Petroglyphs, thunderbirds, spirals, something that might be a cat or might be nothing, just scratches in stone. The mother cougar's breathing hitched, stopped for 2 seconds, started again, rougher than before. Morrison knew that pattern too, the body deciding whether to keep fighting or let go. "Not yet," he said, pulling off his jacket. "Not on my watch." He folded the jacket, placed it under her head. She didn't fight him. Her eyes had gone glassy, unfocused. The cub mewed, high and desperate. Morrison positioned himself over the trap, one boot on each side of the jaws. His hands found the release levers, old mechanism, rusty. Would need everything he had. The mother's breathing stopped again. 3 seconds. 4. Started again. Barely a whisper. Morrison bore down on the trap springs. Metal groaned. His back muscles screamed. The jaws opened a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. Blood poured fresh from the wounds as pressure released. Not enough. The leg still caught. Morrison's hands slipped on the blood-slick metal. The trap snapped shut again with a sound like breaking bones. The mother cougar didn't even flinch. Too far gone to feel it. Morrison grabbed the trap again, ignoring the blood making everything slippery. The cub pressed against his leg, trembling. He looked down at it, those gold eyes staring up at him, reflecting moonlight and something else. Hope. Morrison gripped the trap springs, drew a breath deep into his belly, thought of all the men he'd failed to save, all the wounds he'd been too slow to treat. Not this time. He threw his full weight against the mechanism. Metal shrieked. The jaws opened wide. The mother's leg slipped free, mangled meat and exposed tendon. Morrison fell backward, trap snapping shut on empty air, his head cracked against granite. Stars exploded across his vision. When his sight cleared, the mother cougar had dragged herself 3 feet away from the trap. Fresh blood pooled beneath her. Too much blood, the kind that meant major vessels torn. Morrison scrambled for his medical bag, bandages, carbolic, anything to stop the hemorrhaging. His hand closed on something else, the piece of leather that had fallen from his bag earlier. In the moonlight, he could see the symbols clearer now, not random marks, a map. And at the center of the crude drawing, right where they sat now in this canyon, someone had drawn an K below it. One word in English, scratched deep diag. Morrison shoved the leather map into his shirt pocket. Blood still pumped from the mother cougar's leg, dark, almost black in the moonlight. He pressed both hands against the wound. Hot wetness seeped between his fingers. Not arterial, he said aloud. Habit from the war, talking himself through trauma. Venous bleed can be stopped. He grabbed the bandages, wadded them against the deepest puncture. The mother's eyes had rolled back, showing white. Her breathing came in stutters. The cub pawed at her side, mewing. Morrison's medical bag held one tourniquet, a strip of India rubber he'd saved from Chickamauga. He wrapped it above the wound, used a stick to twist it tight. The bleeding slowed to a trickle. The mother cougar's body convulsed. Once, twice, then still, Morrison felt for a pulse at her throat, faint, rapid, but there. "Need shelter," he muttered. "Need light. Need help." But there was none coming. The canyon stretched 20 feet at its widest point. Morrison stood, knees popping, though his eyes had adjusted enough to make out details. The spring trickling down the western wall, a sandy spot relatively flat near the back, an overhang of rock that might block rain. He'd built plenty of lean-tos during the war, never for a dying cougar, but the principle held. Morrison stumbled out through the canyon entrance, hands searching in darkness for dead wood, pine branches, mostly some aspen. He dragged them back, load after load, while the cub stayed pressed against its mother. Fourth trip out, Morrison heard them. Footsteps in the forest, not human, wrong rhythm. He froze, arms full of branches, a deer, white tail, from the sound. Morrison exhaled slow. The steps faded north. Back in the canyon, he lashed branches together with strips torn from his spare shirt. No rope in his bag, oversight he'd regret. The frame leaned against the rock wall. Crude, but functional. He pulled the canvas tarp from his pack, the one that should have been his tent tonight, stretched it over the frame, weighted the edges with stones. The mother cougar hadn't moved. Morrison checked her breathing. Still there, still fighting. The tourniquet had held. He loosened it slightly, watched for fresh bleeding, just a slow ooze now. Time to clean the wound properly. Morrison built a small fire near the shelter. Risky. Smoke might draw attention. But he needed to see what he was doing. The dry pine caught fast. Crackling, orange light danced across the canyon walls, revealing those petroglyphs in detail. Definitely thunderbirds. And cats. Dozens of cats, carved in procession along the stone. He filled his tin cup from the spring. The water ran cold, clean. Morrison set it on the fire to boil, then turned back to his patient. The wounds were worse in firelight. 4 punctures from the trap's teeth, each the width of his thumb, torn muscle visible through the largest. The flesh around them had gone purple-green, skin stretched tight with swelling. The smell made his eyes water, rot and metal and wild animal musk. Morrison pulled out his bottle of whiskey, meant for drinking, but alcohol was alcohol. He poured half into the boiling water, saved half for the wound itself. "This'll hurt," he told the unconscious cat, but infection'll kill you sure as bleeding. He poured the whiskey directly into the punctures. The mother's body jerked, a growl rumbling from her chest, though her eyes stayed closed. Pus and blood bubbled out. Morrison used his cleanest rag to wipe it away, then poured again. The cub watched from beside its mother's head, gold eyes following Morrison's every move. "Your mama's tough," Morrison said to it. "Seen men die from less." The hot water had cooled enough to use. Morrison soaked a bandage, began cleaning around the wounds, dirt, dried blood, and God knew what else came away with each wipe. The mother's leg had swollen to twice normal size. The skin felt hot even through the cloth. Morrison had one needle in his kit, already threaded with silk. The deepest wound needed stitching or it'd never close. He held the edges together with one hand, pushed the needle through with the other. The mother's claws extended, scraped against stone, retracted, but she didn't wake. 7 stitches. Morrison tied off the last one, then wrapped the whole leg in his remaining bandages. They'd need changing soon, but it was the best he could do. The fire had burned low. Morrison added more wood, then sat back on his heels. His hands shook now that the immediate work was done. Blood had dried under his fingernails, in the creases of his palms. The cub crept closer to him. Morrison stayed still. It sniffed his bloody hands, then his medical bag. Finally, it curled up against his thigh. Warmth soaked through Morrison's pants. "Hungry?" "Huh?" he asked. Morrison had 3 strips of jerky in his pack, hard as leather. He held one out. The cub sniffed, turned away. Of course, cats didn't eat dried meat. As if in answer, the cub stood, stretched, and padded out of the canyon. Morrison almost called after it. Stupid impulse. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then the cub returned, dragging a freshly dead rabbit by the neck. The cub dropped the rabbit at Morrison's feet, then looked at its mother. "For her," Morrison asked. "She can't eat." "Not yet." But the cub pushed the rabbit toward him with its nose, insistent. Morrison understood. Share the kill. Pack behavior. He'd been accepted, somehow. He used his knife to skin and gut the rabbit. The liver and heart he set aside for the cats. The meat he'd cook for himself, though his stomach felt too knotted to eat. Morrison skewered a piece on a stick, held it over the coals. The smell of cooking meat filled the canyon. The mother cougar's nose twitched. First movement, besides breathing in an hour. Morrison tore off a small piece of cooked rabbit, approached slowly. The mother's eyes cracked open, unfocused, pupils huge. He held the meat near her nose. Her tongue emerged, rough as sandpaper, and took the offering. "Good," Morrison said. "That's good." He fetched water in his cup. The mother needed fluids more than food. Morrison cupped her great head in one hand, tilted water toward her mouth with the other. Most spilled onto the sand, but some went down. He saw her throat work to swallow. The cub ate the raw organs Morrison had set aside, purring like distant thunder. Then it climbed onto its mother's side, kneading her fur with its paws. She managed one weak lick across its head before exhaustion took her again. Morrison kept the fire going, kept watch. Every hour he checked her breathing, loosened the tourniquet a bit more. The bleeding had stopped completely now. Small victory, but infection could still kill her. Probably would, without proper medicine. Near midnight, clouds rolled in, blocking the stars. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the mountains. Morrison checked his shelter. It would hold against light rain. Maybe. Heavy storm would wash it away. He thought about the leather map in his pocket. DRG written below this spot. Dig for what? And who had hidden it in his medical bag? The mother cougar's breathing changed. Deeper, more regular. Natural sleep now, not unconsciousness. The cub curled tight against her belly, nose tucked under its tail. Morrison added the last of his wood to the fire. He'd need more before dawn. Need many things. Food, clean bandages, medicine. But for now, the three of them were alive, hidden in this canyon that someone had marked important enough to map. Thunder rolled closer. Morrison pulled part of the canvas over himself, back against the rock wall. Through the smoke hole, he could see clouds racing across the narrow strip of sky. Lightning flickered, brief and white. In that instant of brightness, Morrison saw them. Boot prints in the sand near the canyon entrance. Fresh, not his. Someone had been here, watching, and from the depth of those prints, they'd been carrying something heavy. Morrison's eyes snapped open. Gray dawn light filtered through the canyon opening. The fire had died to ash. His neck ached from sleeping propped against stone. Horses, two of them, picking their way through the forest. Morrison rolled to his knees, joints stiff with cold. The mother cougar lay breathing slow and deep. The cub had wedged itself under her chin, both still asleep. The hoofbeats stopped maybe 30 yards from the canyon entrance. Saddle leather creaked. Boots hit ground. Track leads this way. Man's voice, rough with tobacco. See the blood. Morrison's chest went tight. The cub's blood trail from yesterday. He'd never covered it. Could be the cat we're after. Another voice said, younger. Mama cat with a cub. Billy said. Morrison grabbed handfuls of sandy dirt, threw it over the blood spots near the shelter, then more to cover the cougar tracks. The mother's eyes opened, pupils sharp despite the fever. She'd heard them too. Stay quiet, Morrison whispered. Don't move. He shoved his medical bag behind a rock, kicked dirt over the fire's ashes. His rifle, damn it, still back at his original camp. All he had was the knife. The footsteps came closer. Spurs jingling, Morrison grabbed the leather map from his pocket, flipped it over, blank side up. He pulled out his pencil stub, started sketching random lines, elevation marks, compass points. Anything that looked official. Canyon here, the younger voice said. Narrow? Morrison buttoned his jacket to hide the blood on his shirt, ran fingers through his hair, tried to look like a man who'd been surveying land, not doctoring a cougar. A shadow fell across the canyon entrance. Morrison kept sketching, didn't look up. Morning, gentlemen. Well, hell. The older man squeezed through the opening, thick-set, gray beard stained yellow around the mouth, Remington rifle in one hand. Didn't expect company. Morrison glanced up, smiled. Morrison, Northern Pacific Railroad. He tapped the leather. Surveying water sources. The second man followed, younger, maybe 20, with nervous eyes. Both wore canvas pants, wool coats gone greasy with wear. Trappers, no question. The older one spat tobacco juice. It splattered across Morrison's boot, dark brown against the leather. Surveyors, huh? Morrison held his gaze, didn't blink, didn't move. That's right. The younger trapper had spotted the shelter. You camping here? Just for the night. Good water source. Morrison stood slowly, showing empty hands, making notes on flow rate, mineral content, all by yourself. The older trapper's eyes narrowed. No crew. Preliminary survey. Yet Morrison folded the leather, casual as could be. Company sends one man first. If I find anything promising, they send a full team. The older trapper walked deeper into the canyon, rifle loose in his grip. Morrison's shoulders tensed. 10 more feet and he'd see past the shelter. See the cougars. You boys lose something? Morrison asked. The trapper stopped, turned. Maybe. Saw some tracks headed toward the Silver Creek yesterday. Morrison pulled out his pencil again, sketched a rough map on a flat rock. Big cat, looked like going northwest. The younger trapper perked up. How fresh. Few hours old when I saw them to around midday. The older one came back toward Morrison, close enough that Morrison could smell the chewing tobacco, the unwashed clothes, the gun oil. Funny thing, the trapper said, we had a trap set not far from here. Expensive trap, it's missing. Morrison shrugged. Haven't seen any traps, just rocks and water. Indians? Probably. The younger one said, they've been stealing traps all season. The older trapper studied Morrison's face. You see any Indians? Not a soul. Behind the shelter, hidden in morning shadow. The cub stirred. Morrison coughed loud to cover any sound. Dusty canyon, he said. Bad for the lungs. The older trapper walked to the spring, knelt, cupped water to drink. Morrison watched him study the petroglyphs on the wall. The man's fingers traced one of the carved cats. Old, Morrison offered. Centuries, I'd guess. Worth anything. To historians, maybe. Railroad doesn't care about old pictures. The trapper stood, wiping his mouth. You got any paperwork from this railroad company? Morrison's jaw tightened. Back at my main camp, 2 miles east. Show us. Not a request. Morrison made himself laugh. You boys really think I'm lying about surveying? What else would I be doing out here? Stealing traps. The younger one said, Do I look like I need to steal traps? Morrison gestured at his clothes. Dirty, but well made. City clothes. I make $40 a month plus expenses? The older trapper considered this. $40 was good money, foos. More than trappers made most months. Still want to see papers, he said. Morrison nodded toward the canyon entrance. Then let's go. Sooner I show you, sooner I can get back to work. He started walking. Bold move, but sitting still meant they'd search the canyon. Morrison squeezed through the entrance, heard them following. His hands trembled. He shoved them in his pockets. Outside, their horses stood tied to a pine. A third horse, too. Pack animal, loaded with pelts. Fox, beaver, something that might be wolf. Morrison led them east through the forest, trying to remember where he'd set his original camp. The charcoal marks on trees helped. There, his tent. The Winchester still propped against the pine. He dug through his pack, pulled out an envelope he'd been carrying for weeks, letter from his sister in St. Louis. But the envelope had Northern Pacific Railroad printed on it. She worked as a secretary there, used company stationery. Morrison handed it to the older trapper, who squinted at the text. Can't read, the man finally said. The younger one took it. Says Northern Pacific. He looked impressed. Real letterhead and everything. Morrison pulled out his botanical journal, flipped to pages covered with sketches of plants. Survey notes. Flora indicates water table depth. The trappers exchanged glances. Told you it was Indians, the younger one said. The older one handed back the envelope, still suspicious, but less so. You see our trap, you leave it be. Wouldn't touch it. And that cat heading to Silver Creek, big female yellow-brown, Morrison nodded, had something following it, smaller, maybe a cub. The younger trapper grinned. 2 pelts, better than 1. They turned to leave. The older one paused, looked back. Railroad really coming through here? Maybe, Morrison said. Depends what I find. Be good for business. Easier to ship pelts. They mounted their horses. Morrison watched them ride north toward Silver Creek, opposite direction from the canyon. He stood there, still as stone, until the hoofbeats faded completely. His knees buckled. Morrison caught himself against a tree, hands shaking hard now. Sweat soaked through his shirt, despite the morning cold. He'd sent them away, but they'd be back. Men like that didn't give up on an expensive trap. Morrison gathered his things, tent, rifle, remaining supplies, loaded it all into his pack. He needed to get back to the canyon, move the cougars somewhere safer. The sun had risen above the trees by the time he squeezed back through the canyon entrance. The shelter still stood, no sound from inside. Morrison pulled back the canvas. The mother cougar lay in the same position, but her eyes were different, clear, focused. The fever had broken sometime while he was gone. The cub sat beside her, alert, and next to them, placed neat as could be, lay 3 objects Morrison hadn't seen before. A leather pouch, heavy with something metallic, a blood-stained piece of paper, and a Newhouse No. 5 trap, its jaws bent completely backward. Someone had been here. While Morrison led the trappers away, someone had entered the canyon, someone strong enough to destroy a bear trap with their bare hands. Morrison picked up the leather pouch, heavy. Coins shifted inside, gold from the sound. The blood-stained paper was a deed, land deed for 40 acres, including this canyon. The name had been scratched out with what looked like claws. The destroyed trap lay like a broken jaw. Steel twisted beyond any tool's capability. Morrison's neck prickled. He scanned the canyon walls. Nothing moved except morning shadows. The mother cougar lifted her head, sniffed the air. Her nose pointed toward the canyon entrance, then swung west, back east. She was tracking something Morrison couldn't smell. "Who was here?" he asked her. Foolish question. The cub padded to the ruined trap, batted it with one paw. The metal rang against stone. Then it did something strange, lay flat on its belly, tail straight out, completely still. The mother made a sound, not a growl, lower. A rumble Morrison felt in his chest more than heard. The cub's tail twitched, just the tip, once left, once right. A grasshopper landed 3 feet from the cub's nose. The young cat didn't move, didn't seem to breathe. The mother's tail rose slightly, curved right. The cub crept forward, not straight at the grasshopper, curved right, using a small rock as cover. Its paws made no sound on the sand. Morrison held his breath. He'd hunted all his life. But this was different. Teaching. Deliberate instruction from parent to child. The grasshopper's legs tensed to jump. The mother's tail dropped flat. The cub pounced. Too early. The grasshopper leaped away, landed on Morrison's boot. The cub skidded in the sand. Frustrated, the mother made that rumbling sound again, different pitch. The cub returned to her side, head low. She licked its head once, then demonstrated. Despite her mangled leg, the mother cougar dragged herself into position. Same flat posture the cub had tried, but her muscles were relaxed, not tense. Morrison could see the difference now. The cub had been rigid with excitement. The mother was liquid against the ground. Another grasshopper landed, but the mother didn't look at it directly. Her eyes focused past it, on nothing. But Morrison saw her ears tracking the insect's movement. The grasshopper took 2 hops closer. The mother's tail began to rise, slow as morning mist. The cub watched, mimicking the movement with its own tail. The grasshopper cleaned its legs, unaware. The mother struck, even wounded, even lying down. Her paw moved faster than Morrison could follow. The grasshopper disappeared under her pad. She lifted her paw, revealed the insect stunned but alive. The cub pounced on it. Crunching sounds. Morrison pulled out his journal, sketched what he'd seen, the tail positions, the eye focus, the delayed strike. No naturalist had documented this. They shot cougars from distance, studied dead specimens. Nobody watched them teach. A mouse rustled in the dry grass near the shelter. The mother's ears swiveled. She looked at the cub, then at the grass, then back at the cub. The cub understood, dropped low, began stalking. This time its muscles stayed loose. The tail curve was subtle. When it pounced, the mouse squeaked once. Silence. The cub brought the mouse to its mother. She pushed it back with her nose. The cub's kill, the cub's meal. Morrison wrote faster. His pencil stub wore down to nothing. He dug out another, kept writing. The interaction had rules, patterns, a language he was beginning to decode. The sun climbed higher. Time for the mother's wound care. Morrison approached with his medical bag. The mother tensed. Every day for a week now, and she still tensed. Same routine, Morrison said. Check the wound, change bandages. You know this? He knelt beside her. The swelling had gone down. Skin no longer purple-black. The puncture wounds wept clear fluid instead of pus. Healing, slowly, but healing. Morrison unwrapped the bandages. The mother lay still, but her claws extended slightly, ready. The deepest wound had pulled apart. The silk stitches held, but barely. Morrison reached for his bone needle, threaded with the last of his silk. 2 more stitches, he told her. Then we're done. The needle pierced skin. The mother's throat rumbled, not quite a growl. Warning. Morrison worked faster. 1 stitch, 2. Tied off quick. Done! He spread tallow over the wounds. His supply running low, but the rendered fat kept flies away, helped healing. The mother's nose wrinkled at the smell. Fresh bandages. Morrison had torn up his spare shirt, boiled the strips in water and whiskey. They'd last another day, maybe 2. Then he'd need to use his asked shirt. The mother watched him pack his medical supplies. When he reached for the laudanum bottle, nearly empty now, she pulled her leg away. You need this, Morrison said. For pain. She kept the leg out of reach. Morrison frowned. Every other day she'd let him give her drops of laudanum mixed with water. Helped her sleep, let the body heal. But now... He looked closer at her eyes. Clear, alert, the pupils normal-sized, not the pinpoints laudanum caused. You don't want it anymore, Morrison said. Understanding hit. You know it makes you slow, vulnerable. The mother turned to watch her cub practice stalking beetles. Protection mattered more than pain relief. Morrison put the laudanum away. Your choice. The sun passed overhead. Morrison's stomach cramped with hunger. His jerky was long gone. The cub had brought 2 more mice. A ground squirrel, offered to share, pushing the bloody meat toward Morrison with its nose. He'd cooked and eaten the squirrel, trying not to think about how hungry he'd have to be before raw mouse looked appetizing. Late afternoon, the cub played with the destroyed trap, batting it around like a toy. The mother dozed, breathing deep and even. Morrison sketched more observations. Then the mother's head snapped up. Morrison heard it too. Footsteps, but not horses, not boots, bare feet on stone. A shadow fell across the canyon entrance. Morrison's hand went to his knife. An old native woman squeezed through the opening, Shoshone from her dress pattern, gray hair in braids, face mapped with wrinkles. She carried a woven basket. Morrison started to stand. The woman held up one hand. Stop, she looked at the cougars. The mother had raised her head, but hadn't growled. The cub watched from behind its mother. The woman spoke. Not English. Not Shoshone either, or not any dialect Morrison recognized. Older language, guttural, like rocks grinding. She reached into her basket, pulled out dried meat, venison from the smell, placed it on the ground, stepped back. The cub crept forward, sniffed, grabbed the meat, retreated to its mother. The woman looked at Morrison. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts, but she seemed to see him fine. You read the map, she said in English. Morrison's hand went to his pocket. The leather map. You left it, he said. Why? Not me. My grandmother, 50 years ago. Morrison's mind stumbled. That's not possible. The woman smiled, no teeth left. She knew someone would come, someone who would choose the cats over the trap. She reached into her basket again, pulled out a bundle of herbs Morrison didn't recognize, set them by his medical bag. For infection, she said. Crush, mix with water to pack the wounds. Why help us? The woman looked at the petroglyphs on the canyon wall, the carved cats in procession. This place is old, sacred. The cats belong here. She looked back at Morrison. Men with traps don't. Morrison thought of the trappers. They'll be back. No. The woman's smile widened. They found what they wanted at Silver Creek. What? Their horses? Cut loose? Walking home? They'll spend 3 days catching them. Morrison almost laughed. You did that? The woman turned to leave, stopped at the entrance. The thing you haven't dug up yet, she said. Under the stone where the spring begins? My grandmother put it there for you. Morrison looked where the spring emerged from the rock wall, a flat stone at its base, covered with the same petroglyphs. When he looked back, the woman was gone, not even footprints in the sand. The mother cougar made a new sound, soft, almost like a domestic cat's purr, but deeper. Morrison approached the spring. The flat stone was heavy, took both hands to shift. Beneath it, wrapped in oiled leather, is a rifle. Henry repeating rifle, old model, but the brass receiver had been engraved with something that made Morrison's blood go cold. His father's name, and the date, 1832, 20 years before Henry rifles were invented. Morrison's fingers traced the engraving on the rifle's receiver. His father's name, sharp under his thumb, Samuel Morrison Sr., the date impossible. Thunder rolled across the mountains. Morrison looked up. The strip of sky visible through the canyon had gone dark green. Pressure dropped fast enough to pop his ears. The mother cougar struggled to stand. Her wounded leg buckled, but she kept trying. The cub pressed against her side, mewing high and urgent. Morrison rewrapped the rifle, shoved it back under the stone. Questions for later? The air tasted of copper and rain. Fat drops hit the sand. Then more, within seconds. Water poured off the canyon walls in sheets. Morrison grabbed his canvas, tried to stretch it wider over the shelter. Wind ripped it from his hands, sent it flying. The spring's trickle turned muddy, then brown, then a steady stream. Morrison had seen flash floods in box canyons. 2 years back, found 3 dead prospectors after one drowned in minutes. The mother cougar dragged herself toward the eastern wall. Away from the spring, she knew. Water rose around Morrison's boots, cold, moving fast, already 6 inches deep and climbing. The mother collapsed 5 feet from where she'd started. Her breathing came in gasps. The cub gripped her neck scruff in its teeth, pulled, useless. A 50-pound cub couldn't move a 200-pound cat. Morrison slogged through rising water, now knee-deep. His medical bag, he grabbed it, slung it over his shoulder. The rifle would have to stay. Lightning struck close. The flash lit up water pouring through the canyon entrance. A waterfall now, brown with runoff. Morrison pulled off his belt, leather, double thick. He looped it under the mother's chest behind her front legs. She snarled, weak but warning. No time for this, Morrison shouted over the water's roar. He grabbed his wool blanket, floating now, tied one corner to the belt, made a crude sling. The mother's claws raked his arm. 3 lines of fire through his jacket. Morrison didn't stop, couldn't stop. Water at his thighs now. He spotted a ledge on the eastern wall, 15 feet up, maybe 3 feet deep. Had to be enough. Morrison gripped the blanket sling with both hands, pulled. The mother cougar slid 2 feet through muddy water. Again. His boots slipped on submerged rocks. Knee hit stone, stand up, pull again. The cub understood, grabbed the blanket's dragging corner in its teeth, pulled alongside Morrison. Together, they gained another 3 feet. Water rose faster. Morrison's waist now. The current pushed hard, tried to sweep his feet out. If he fell, if he lost grip on the blanket. Rock by rock, foot by foot. Morrison's back muscles screamed. His hands had gone numb from gripping wet wool. Rain hammered his face, blurred everything beyond arm's reach. Lightning again. In that white instant, Morrison saw the ledge directly above. Also saw a handhold, maybe a crack in the rock face. Morrison let go with one hand, reached up. His fingers found the crack. Sharp edges cut into his palm. He pulled himself up 2 feet. Dragging the blanket sling, the mother cougar's weight nearly yanked him down. Morrison's shoulder joint popped. Pain shot down his arm. The cub had climbed onto its mother's back. Now it jumped for the ledge, made it, turned and mewed at Morrison, urging him up. Morrison got one knee on a tiny outcrop, pushed, pulled. The mother cougar's front half reached the ledge. She dug in with her good front leg, helped drag herself the rest of the way. Morrison hauled himself up after her, collapsed on the narrow ledge, 3 feet deep. As he'd guessed, barely enough for them all. Water kept rising, now only 4 feet below their ledge. If it came higher, the mother cougar lay panting, eyes closed. Morrison pressed against the back wall, pulled her partly onto his lap to make room. She didn't fight, couldn't fight. The cub wedged itself between them. 3 bodies on a ledge built for one, dark as midnight now, though Morrison's pocket watch, when he could see it by lightning flash, showed barely 7 o'clock. The storm hammered the canyon. Water rose to 3 feet below them. 2 feet, 1 foot. Morrison felt the spray on his boots. The mother cougar's breathing had gone shallow. Shock setting in. Her body trembled against his chest. He pulled his oilskin coat around all 3 of them as best he could. Useless against this rain, but maybe it held some heat. The cub burrowed under Morrison's arm. He felt its heart racing against his ribs. Lightning struck the canyon rim. The flash showed water inches from their ledge. Morrison's teeth chattered. The mother's body had gone limp, still breathing, but barely. He pressed his hand against her chest, heart still beating, fast, uneven. "Stay with us," Morrison said, his voice lost in the storm's roar. The cub made a sound Morrison had never heard from any cat, high, desperate, almost human in its fear. Water touched the ledge, cold fingers reaching. Morrison pulled his legs up, pulled the mother tighter against him. No more room to retreat. The water kept coming. It swept over the ledge, 1 inch, 2. The mother cougar's nose went under. Morrison lifted her head, held it above the surface. His arms shook with exhaustion. The cub climbed onto Morrison's shoulder. Claws dug through his jacket into skin. Morrison didn't push it away. If they drowned, at least they'd drown together. Lightning. Thunder so close Morrison felt it in his bones. The water stopped rising. Morrison counted heartbeats. 10, 20, 50. The water pulled back. Just an inch, but pulling back. Within minutes, the flood dropped below their ledge. The rain softened from hammering to steady. The wind died. Morrison's arms had locked around the mother cougar. He couldn't let go. Muscles frozen. The cub still perched on his shoulder, claws deep in his flesh. Hours passed, maybe, no way to tell. The rain stopped. Clouds broke enough for moonlight to filter through. The canyon floor lay scoured clean. Morrison's shelter gone. The spring invisible under tons of relocated rock. Everything familiar erased. The mother cougar stirred, lifted her head, looked at Morrison with eyes that seemed to see him for the first time, not as threat or annoyance, but as what he'd become. Pack. Morrison's fingers found her pulse. "Steady now. Stronger. Made it," he whispered. The cub climbed down, shook itself. Water flew from its coat. It pawed at Morrison's medical bag, still somehow attached to his shoulder. Morrison opened it with numb fingers. Everything soaked. The bandages useless. The herbs the old woman had given him, washed away. The laudanum bottle cracked, empty. But in the bottom, wrapped in oiled cloth, the bone needle and silk thread had survived. And something else, a glass vial. Morrison didn't recognize. Clear liquid inside, a label in that same ancient script from the map. Morrison pulled it out. In the moonlight, the liquid seemed to glow, not reflecting light, generating it. He uncorked the vial. No smell. The liquid clung to the seats like oil, but looked clear as water. The mother cougar sniffed at it, then did something that froze Morrison's blood. She spoke, not in words, but Morrison heard it in his mind, clear as his own thoughts. Pour it on the wounds. Morrison's hand jerked. The vial almost fell. The mother looked at him, waiting. His dead father's rifle, a storm that came from nowhere. Now this. Morrison's hands shook as he unwrapped the mother's bandages. The wounds had reopened in the struggle, blood seeping slow but steady. He poured 3 drops of the glowing liquid onto the deepest puncture. The flesh began to knit, closed before his eyes. The flesh sealed. Morrison watched muscle fibers weave together under transparent skin. The puncture wounds closed from the inside out, leaving pink scar tissue that looked weeks old, not seconds. Morrison's hand trembled. 3 drops left in the vial. He poured 1 more drop on each remaining wound. The torn flesh knitted, blood stopped seeping. In 30 seconds, the mother cougar's leg showed only scars where killing wounds had been. The vial was empty. Morrison corked it. Hands numb, the mother cougar flexed her leg, tested weight on it. The joint held. She stood, weak still, but standing. The cub rubbed against her legs, purring rough like gravel in a pan. The mother licked its head, then looked at Morrison. No more voices in his head. Whatever had happened, the vial, the healing, that impossible moment of understanding, it was over. The canyon floor lay under 2 feet of new sand and debris. Morrison climbed down from the ledge, legs shaking, his boots squelched in mud. The sun had risen, steam lifting from wet rock. The flat stone where he'd hidden the rifle was gone. 20 tons of rock had shifted in the flood. Morrison dug where he thought it should be. His fingers found nothing but more stone. His father's name on that rifle. 1832. Morrison's father died in 1867 when Morrison was 12. Never mentioned Montana, never mentioned anything strange. But he'd kept journals, boxes of them. Morrison hadn't read them after the funeral. Too painful. They sat in his sister's attic in St. Louis. Morrison gave up digging. His supplies were scattered, most washed away. He found his rifle wedged between rocks, barrel bent, useless. His pack torn open, contents gone. The coffee pot, dented flat. 1 tin of peaches had wedged under a boulder. Morrison pried it out with his knife. The label gone. Metal rusted, but it sloshed when shaken. Food. The mother cougar picked her way across the debris. No limp. She sniffed at something half buried in sand. Morrison brushed it clear, his compass. Brass case battered, but the needle still pointed north. 3 days passed. Morrison had nothing left to hunt with. The cub brought mice, ground squirrels. Morrison ate them, cooked over fires made from flood-swept wood that took hours to dry enough to burn. The mother hunted despite her recent injury. The 3rd night, she dragged in half a deer. Morrison had never seen cougars share kills with others outside their family. But she tore off a haunch, dropped it at his feet. The meat kept them fed for 2 more days. The cub had grown. When it stood on hind legs, paws on Morrison's chest, its head reached his collar. It played rougher now. Morrison's arms were scratched, his jacket shredded. The mother grew restless. Pacing the canyon, standing at the entrance, looking out, returning. 6th day since the flood. Morrison woke to find the mother gone. The cub mewed anxiously, searched every corner of the canyon. She returned at sunset, carrying a rabbit, but she didn't eat, just watched Morrison and the cub share it. 7th day. The mother led them out of the canyon at dawn. First time Morrison had left since arriving. She climbed the ridge above, sure-footed on granite. Morrison followed, grabbing pine branches to haul himself up. The cub bounded ahead, then back, impatient with human slowness. From the ridge, Morrison could see for miles. Mountains stretched north into Canada. Forest spread in every direction. No smoke from any fire. No sign of humans at all. The mother stood at the highest point, wind ruffling her coat. She looked magnificent, healthy, whole. That's when Morrison understood. She didn't need him anymore. 8th day, Morrison used charcoal to write in his journal, ink long gone. He sketched the mother teaching the cub to fish at the creek, patience of a saint. That cat. The cub kept jumping too early, scaring the trout. Finally caught one. Tiny thing, more bones than meat. The mother watched Morrison writing, came close enough to sniff the journal, left a muddy paw print across his sketch. 9th day, Morrison's boots were falling apart. The sole had separated on the left one, flapped with each step. He tied it with strips torn from his ruined shirt. The cub could take down rabbits alone now. Quick, efficient kills.
It still brought them to Morrison first, seeking approval. Morrison always nodded, said, "Good hunt." The cub would purr, then eat. 10th day, morning. Morrison woke to find the mother standing over him. She nudged his shoulder with her nose. "Get up!" The cub had already caught breakfast, a fat grouse. They shared it in silence. Morrison saved the tin of peaches. Something told him to wait. The mother walked to the canyon entrance, looked back at Morrison, waiting. He gathered what little remained, the compass, his journal, the empty glass vial, though he didn't know why, his knife, the medical bag, empty except for the bone needle. The mother led them out of the canyon, not up the ridge this time, east, through the pine forest Morrison hadn't explored. The cub ranged ahead, investigating everything. An hour's walk brought them to an overlook.
Below, Morrison could see the valley where he'd first made camp. His tent still stood, tiny from this distance. Civilization, or its edge. Anyway, the mother sat, the cub pressed against her side. Morrison understood this was goodbye. He pulled out the tin of peaches, used his knife to open it. The fruit was brown, syrupy. Morrison poured some onto a flat rock for the cats. They lapped at the sweet juice. A taste they'd never know again. Morrison drank the rest straight from the tin. Sugar burst across his tongue. Tasted like another world. The mother stood, walked to a young pine at the trail's edge. She reached up, hooked the compass from Morrison's hand with one claw. Gentle, deliberate. She hung it on a low branch. Morrison understood. A marker. Not for him to return. He knew he wouldn't. But proof it had happened. That for 11 days, 3 different species had become something like family. The cub started to follow Morrison down the trail. The mother made a soft sound. The cub stopped, looked back. She touched her nose to its head. Gentle push backward. Stay with me. The cub mewed, confused, torn between its mother and the human who'd become part of its world. Morrison knelt. The cub came to him. He ran his hand along its spine once, felt the power already building in those muscles. "Go on," Morrison whispered. "You belong here." The cub looked at him with those gold eyes, then turned back to its mother. Morrison stood, started walking, didn't look back. He made it 20 steps before hearing the soft padding of feet behind him. His chest tightened. He kept walking. The footsteps stopped. Morrison glanced back. Both cats sat where he'd left them, watching. The mother's tail curved around her cub. Morrison raised his hand once. Farewell. The mother blinked, slow, deliberate. The same trust gesture from that first night. Then she turned and melted into the forest. The cub followed. In seconds, they were invisible among the shadows and pine. Morrison stood alone on the trail. Wind moved through the trees. The compass glinted on its branch, catching morning sun. He walked down toward his old camp. Each step took him further from whatever had happened in that canyon. Real or not, explainable or not, it was over. His tent was exactly as he'd left it, his supplies untouched. Even the botanical samples he'd collected, pressed between boards. Morrison pulled off his shredded jacket, his destroyed boots. He had spares in the tent, clean clothes, a world that made sense. As he changed clothes, something fell from his ruined jacket pocket. The leather map. Morrison picked it up, turned it over. The side with the canyon marked was same as before, but the blank side, where he'd sketched fake survey marks. New writing had appeared. In English this time. His father's handwriting. Morrison would recognize it anywhere. The debt is paid. The watch is ended. Let them be. Below that, a date August 15th, 1832, exactly 50 years ago to the day. Morrison rode into Bearmouth on a borrowed horse. Tom Brennan's mare, the rancher, had found Morrison walking the road. Took pity. Morrison's story was simple. His horse spooked, ran off with his supplies. He'd been surviving in the woods for 2 weeks. Jesus. Doc, Brennan said when Morrison slid off the mare in front of the general store. You look like hell. Morrison caught his reflection in the store window. Beard grown wild, clothes hanging loose. He'd lost 15 pounds. Scratches across his face and hands, some still scabbed. Need a bath? Morrison said. And supplies. Word spread. By evening, half the town had heard about Doc Morrison's mishap. The other half would know by morning. Mrs. Henderson cornered him outside the boarding house. 2 weeks in the wilderness. How did you survive? Found water, caught some rabbits. Morrison kept walking. But your medical bag, did you lose it? Morrison lifted the empty bag. Still got it. She wanted more. They all did. Morrison gave them nothing. His room at the boarding house was as he'd left it. Narrow bed, washstand, medical books on the shelf. Morrison stripped, saw himself full in the mirror. The scratches made a map across his torso. 3 parallel lines here, single gouges there. Each one a memory. The cub playing too rough. The mother's warning when he'd moved too fast. Morrison heated water, scrubbed himself raw. The scratches stung. Good, real, proof it happened. The barber took one look at Morrison's beard and charged double, like cutting wire. He muttered, working his scissors. Morrison sent a telegraph to St. Louis. Need supplies. Lost everything. Send quickly. Then he wrote his sister. Asked about their father's journals. Did she still have them? Could she look for any mention of Montana? Of 1832? 3 weeks passed before the supplies arrived. New medical instruments, bottles of carbolic, laudanum, quinine, fresh bandages. Morrison unpacked them in his office. Everything clean and sharp and civilized. Young Dr. Palmer stopped by, fresh from medical college in Philadelphia, eager to learn from Morrison's experience. Heard you had quite an adventure, Palmer said. Living wild for 2 weeks. Morrison measured laudanum into a bottle. Wasn't so bad. But how did you treat patients without supplies? Morrison's hand paused. He thought of the mother cougar's wounds closing her, flesh knitting under that impossible liquid. Sometimes, Morrison said, the best treatment is to step back, let nature work. Palmer laughed. They didn't teach us that in Philadelphia. No, they wouldn't. Winter came hard. Snow by October, frozen solid by November. Morrison treated frostbite, pneumonia, broken bones from ice falls, normal wounds, human wounds. They healed slow, the way wounds should. His sister's letter arrived in January. She'd found their father's journals. The 1832 volume was missing pages, torn out, but she'd found a loose paper tucked in 1830, a sketch of a compass hanging from a tree branch. Below it, their father had written, "Some debts pass through blood." Morrison burned the letter. April 1883. Snow melted late that year. Morrison waited until the trails cleared, then rode out toward Bitterroot Valley. He told Mrs. Henderson he was collecting early spring herbs, bloodroot for coughs, wild ginger for digestion. The canyon was changed. Spring floods had carved new channels. Young grass covered the sandy floor. Morrison almost rode past it. He tied his horse a quarter-mile away, walked in on free foot. The petroglyphs remained on the walls. The spring ran clear. No sign anything unusual had happened here. Morrison found good specimens near the creek. Jack in the pulpit, twisted stalk. He sketched them in his new journal, noted their locations. A flash of brass caught his eye. The compass hung from a pine branch. Not the same tree where he'd left it. This one stood 30 feet north, better sheltered from wind. Morrison approached slowly. The compass was clean, polished. The brass gleamed like new. He reached for it, stopped. Movement in the forest beyond. The mother cougar emerged from shadow, fuller now, her coat thick with spring growth. Behind her, another cat, the cub, though not a cub anymore, nearly full size, muscles rippling under golden fur. And behind them, both, two smaller shapes, cubs, the next generation. Morrison's breath caught. The younger cat, the one he'd doctored as a cub, was female. Had cubs of her own now. They stood 20 feet apart. Morrison didn't move, didn't speak. The mother approached first. Slow, careful steps. Morrison dropped to one knee, making himself smaller. She stopped just out of reach. Those amber eyes studied him. Then she turned her head, looked at her daughter. The younger cat came forward. Morrison recognized her despite the growth. Same gold eyes, same tilt to her ears. She closed the distance between them. Her nose touched Morrison's hand, warm breath. Whiskers tickled his palm. For 3 heartbeats, they stayed frozen. Then she pulled back, returned to her mother. The new cubs ventured closer, curious. Their mother, Morrison's cub, grown now, made a soft sound. They retreated immediately. The elder cougar looked at Morrison one more time. He saw knowledge in those eyes, memory, but also distance. They were not friends, not family. They were what they'd always been, adult and human, sharing space for this moment only. She turned, led her family back into forest. The younger cat paused at the tree line, looked back once. Then she, too, vanished. Morrison stayed kneeling until his legs went numb. Then he stood, walked to the compass. Someone, something, had wound the chain around the branch 3 times, secured but removable. He left it hanging. Morrison rode back to town as evening fell. Mrs. Henderson was sweeping her porch. "Find your herbs, doctor. Some." "You look troubled." Morrison dismounted, considered his words. "Ever feel like you've glimpsed something beyond ordinary life?" She stopped sweeping. "My Herbert, before he passed, swore he saw his father's ghost the night before he died, standing at the foot of the bed, waiting." She studied Morrison's face. "You see something out there?" "Maybe." "Best not to dwell. That's wild country. Makes people see things." Morrison nodded, led his horse to the stable. That evening, young Dr. Palmer visited again. They shared whiskey, talked about treatments for summer cholera. Palmer had energy, dedication. He'd be a good doctor. "I've been thinking about what you said," Palmer told him, "about stepping back, letting nature work." Morrison poured another finger of whiskey, and seems like giving up. We're doctors. We're supposed to fight. Morrison thought of the mother cougar refusing laudanum because it would make her weak, of wounds healing in seconds under impossible liquid, of connections that transcended species. "Fighting's important," Morrison said, "but knowing when not to fight, that matters too." Palmer frowned. "How do you know the difference?" Morrison swirled his whiskey, watched lamplight through amber liquid. "Experience, instinct, sometimes you just know." "That's not very scientific." "No, it's not." They drank in silence. Outside, the town settled into night. Dogs barked, horses stamped in stables, ordinary sounds of civilization. "You never really told anyone," Palmer said. "What happened those 2 weeks you were lost?" Morrison set down his glass. "No." "Must have been something. You came back different." "Did I? More?" Palmer searched for words. "Careful, like you're listening for something." Morrison smiled. First real smile in months. "Maybe I am." Palmer left near midnight. Morrison sat alone, lamp burning low. He pulled out his journal, found the page where the mother cougar had left her paw print. The mud had dried, flaked mostly away, but the impression remained. He thought about writing to his sister again, asking her to search for more of their father's missing pages, to understand what debt had passed through blood to him. Instead, he closed the journal. Some things didn't need understanding. They just needed to be. Morrison treated patients for another 40 years in that town, delivered babies, set bones, fought epidemics. He never returned to the canyon, never saw the cougars again. But sometimes, treating a difficult wound, he'd remember the mother's eyes in firelight, the weight of trust given without words, the simple fact that for 11 days the boundary between wild and human had dissolved. He'd tell young doctors, when they asked about unusual cases, "The body knows how to heal. Our job is to help when we can, and step aside when we can't." They'd nod, thinking they understood. They didn't. Morrison never explained further, never mentioned the cougars, the impossible liquid, his father's rifle that shouldn't exist. He carried those memories quiet as scar tissue, private as prayer. When Morrison died in 1923, age 68, they found his journal. Most pages were botanical sketches, medical notes. But one entry, dated April 1883, had only 3 words: "Debt paid forward." His compass was never found. I've told you Morrison's story as it was passed down through found journals and whispered accounts in Bearmouth's Historical Society. Some call it frontier legend. Others insist every word is true. What matters isn't whether that healing liquid existed or if cougars can truly communicate. What matters is this: Morrison understood that healing sometimes means stepping aside. That connection doesn't require words, and that the greatest mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but witnessed. That compass still hangs somewhere in Montana's wilderness. Travelers report finding it clean, polished, moved to different trees, as if something still tends to it, still remembers. Maybe our ancestors knew truths we've forgotten in our rush toward progress. Maybe the line between human and wild is thinner than we pretend. Morrison never tried to prove what happened in that canyon. He simply lived differently afterward, quieter, more observant, listening for something just beyond hearing. Some debts pass through blood. Some connections transcend species. And sometimes the most profound experiences are the ones we carry in silence. This story, inspired by tales of frontier Montana, was created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior toward humans or animals. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The story celebrates compassion, respect for wildlife, and the mysterious bonds that can form between species when trust replaces fear.